Hi, Jacinta. Welcome to the DevReady podcast. Great to have you here. Jacinta's from Fifth Element. Jacinta, welcome and tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on board. Really excited for today. The Fifth Element is a digital transformation company, and we look to help support businesses move through the digital revolution and help eliminate the Kodak moments. Really, is probably what our biggest catch cry is.
Okay.
So that's what we aim to do, both small business and big business.
I'd like to ask this sort of question because it can mean different things to everybody. What does digital transformation mean to you within a business setting?
Within a business setting, it's definitely about responding to the forces of progress, is probably the simplest way I put it. We are being driven by technology, and that's enabled a whole range of different things. And it's not until you sort of sit back and you have a look into the past, even 4 or 5 years ago, that you understand how far we've actually transformed without even really knowing it. And what we've changed in the last 30 years, we'll be seeing in the next 3 years.
Yeah, and that evolution comes quickly now. It seems to be getting quicker and quicker as we go. So, Jacinta, from your experience, now today we've got you on to talk a lot about data. Now, you've been working in the startup world, business world, in terms of transformation. In terms of data, what sort of impact does that have on a business and direction moving forward?
We use data to make all our decisions, very well-informed decisions, and we support businesses to do the same thing. So I've had experience over the last 10 years, I suppose, being able to understand patterns in data to then actually be able to inform business decisions. So create business intelligence around data to ensure that I'm actually making the correct decisions and I'm not moving from like a gut or a reactive type of situation. So to do that, you actually need to come like helicopter up and understand exactly where the business needs to go or what questions you actually need to ask to then be able to try and find or weed through the data to create meaning from that data and to ensure that that data is actually giving you accuracy as opposed to biases as well. So you need to understand where the information's come from, how live that data is, how to question or interrogate that data to get true meaning that's actually of business intelligence. And normally speaking, you need to put some ETL or some assumptions around that data to actually really interrogate it correctly.
You mentioned something about questions. What are questions relevant per business, per sector? How do you generally look at diving into questions before you look at data?
We unravel it. So we always start the questions with how might we, and so that's then you're trying to solve a problem. And we also we do a little bit of a workshop around what does success actually look like. So unless you understand where your goals are in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, you don't understand what success is, and then you can't drive towards it. So then we can't unpack what that goal is to understand where the questions are, to then find the data, to then actually be able to answer that question, to then give you the knowledge as to whether or not you're actually on the right track or if you're actually on the wrong track and you need to stop, pivot, and then continue.
So in terms of, you mentioned the Kodak moment right at the start of the conversation. So when you're in a conversation, especially with organisations, businesses, what are their fears, concerns, given the state of play with transformation and everything digital right now? Are people fearful of getting left behind, or are they more open to the opportunity of changing business model, changing direction? How do you feel the market is playing out right now?
It's really mixed, actually. There's a lot of fear of change, and the technology or digital transformation actually affects all areas of the business. It's not just technology. So what we've done is we've developed in conjunction with Deloitte, or off the back of Deloitte and EY Sweeney, a digital maturity scanning program that actually looks at the entire business. And again, this is all very data driven. So we actually understand exactly where the weaknesses and gaps are. And you may have all the technology in the world, but if you haven't brought your people with you, you will not be able to transform to spite yourself.
Okay.
So there is, it's really quite different. Every business is very, very different. And a lot of businesses are sitting there going, oh no, we don't need to change. And then, I had a sign company actually the other day. We don't need to change. Digital doesn't affect us. We have physical signs outside. And so, we're okay. And I said, well, hang on, 20 years ago, we were using a paintbrush.
Yes, it's a
so digital has affected your business.
Yeah, correct.
Some people are just hidden to the fact and what digital means. They think it's a physical product, but it's the digital side that creates and assists and develops it.
Yes, yeah. And I use Kodak Moment because that's close to my heart. My very first business was actually a 1 hour photo shop.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went through that Kodak Moment. I was a part of all of that. And I, to begin with, I had a 1 hour photo lab that was inside a chemist in regional New South Wales.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
And and so I became president of understand what was going on in the external environment for my business, and that wasn't enough for me. So then I sat on the board of the Photo Marketing Association, and I started to understand what was going on within my industry. At the end of 1999, I launched one of the first digital labs in New South Wales.
Okay.
I was a young mum with 3 children, and I was only 26 at the time. Being guided by my gut only, and the fact that the big boys were importing these huge machines worth $500,000, and they wouldn't do that if they were going to fall over. So, I got out in front and I partnered with AGFA, and I became AGFA's first digital show lab in New South Wales. And we
AGFA,
actually then...
I don't know, I've never heard of AGFA.
They made film initially.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay, I haven't heard of
it. Yeah, they made film.
Yeah, they were one of the 4 big brands.
CDs, DVDs, all that sort of stuff.
So there was Kodak, Fuji, AGFA, and Konica.
I've heard of all other 3, but not AGFA. So there you go.
German.
Yes.
German.
All right. That would have been a good brand, I imagine.
Yeah, it was great technology.
Yeah.
So so we did that, and we solved. We looked to the skies, and we solved because we needed to make that work very quickly.
Yes.
So we solved the distribution problems for one of the biggest users of imagery, and that was Getty's and Reuters. So, we became very, very successful. And in 2002, I sold that lab.
Yes.
And it was one of the longest lasting labs. It's now gone.
Yeah, okay.
I used, and again, back then I was understanding patterns and trying to make those patterns help me make decisions. Moving forward.
It's about your trajectory. Where do you think we're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years? And those decisions need to be thought about now. And business models are shifting, thinking needs to shift. And like you said earlier, we're moving faster and faster. So the next 3 years we will change again compared to what we've seen in the past 5. So it's a very interesting conversation that we can go down. But today, what we really want to dig in on is really data and what that can actually mean for a business. You've touched upon, obviously, looking at it from a gut perspective, but how do we get down to the root of what's actually going on within an organisation? I'm in a startup business, I'm a non-tech, I'm in an industry, I'm looking at an industry. Where should I start? There's a plethora of information out there. Where do you think we should start?
Huge question.
It is. I like to ask big questions.
Okay, so I'm going to use an example of a startup that's just come to me. It's a very simple concept. It's Netflix for seniors is what the startup is, and she'll love me using her as an example. So what she's doing is she's simply entertaining. Her product is about entertaining elderly. On scale. So she does a lot of live performance now, and she's sort of gone, well, okay, if we digitize this and put it on scale, we can help make a lot more people happy, and that's what her outcome was. So she came to us with a very, very basic MVP that she had tested in a home in a group setting to make sure that it actually had the same level of interaction with the residents as what her live interactions have, and it did, and she got lots of smiles and people were getting up and going, so she knew a product was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So she came to us to understand, okay, where do I take it from here and how do I go? And so as with most startups, they're very, very focused on their concept and their product, and they don't actually understand what the other side of that product can actually create. So first of all,
create. So what do you mean by the other side of the product?
So with looking at the other side of the product, so the external product is entertainment for the elderly, and then when you turn the business around and actually have a look at the back end, and you go, okay, hang on, what are we gathering here? What information are we gathering? And there is always a plethora of data out there that you can capture, but the trick of really understanding how to interrogate that data with meaning and let go of a lot of data as well.
Yeah, because there's so much there. So where do you hone in on is probably the biggest question that we can all ask.
Yeah. So first of all, we looked at honing in on one particular segment of data, and that would be, okay, how do we understand what's working and what's not working with your product, so that we can continually improve the product and build the areas. So she had entertainment, trivia, facts, and a couple of news feed.
Okay.
So we needed to understand what people were actually pulling towards them and what they were watching and what was the most beneficial, so that she could continue to actually be able to create that content and know where to put. Otherwise, you're building everything the same, and you're wasting some of your energy. So that was number one area that we went after. And then the second area that we went after was we actually had a look out there and go, okay, what is a similar business model doing and how are they using data to make decisions or help the user or create a more beneficial product. And so obviously we looked at Netflix.
Yeah, definitely. So a similar model. So looking at what they're doing.
Yeah.
Get that.
Yeah. And so Netflix uses the user's information and puts it through an algorithm to start understanding and be able to predict what the content and then put relevant information in front of the user, and therefore then making the product seamless for the actual user, increasing the value of that product. So that was the second avenue of data that we established to go after. And then there was the third avenue of data, which was we need to actually be able to make business decisions. And to be able to make those business decisions, we need to understand where to put money, where the gaps are, where to buy content in, what's, so if you're looking at efficiencies of timeframes of, Julie actually going out and finding all of those trivia questions and writing it, or getting a copywriter in. So we had to understand what level of products what programming they wanted, the users wanted, to then understand what resources to put behind that.
Get it.
And then also understand what it means if the bottom line of the business is going up. What does that actually mean? So, and again, we formed a dashboard that would understand with, as the cash flow, as we monetize the product and went out to market, how, at what stages do we then continue to build? So they were the various different angles the three different angles that we took initially. And then finally, we have to understand that data is worth more than oil. If you put it to the right data partner, you can actually create new revenue streams that have got nothing to do with the actual product.
Interesting.
So we applied that logic to her startup as well, and we created 5 different data partners. So 5 partners that would be highly interested in various different pieces of information that her product could capture within the elderly home environment. And they were found based off a big need or a big problem, and that big problem was put forward to the entire industry by the Royal Commission, and the mental health of our elderly within the elderly home system and that structured care system. And so her product actually could demonstrate the elderly getting up and moving around. And then if we also captured or put that data towards that movement data or increased movement towards the medication that was being given to that individual and the reduction of that medication, we were then actually starting to form some very, very good intel to be able to support the actual home in what they are deploying within, and a point of difference with the programming that the individuals within the residents, within the elderly care, depending on what programming they were bringing towards them, we could actually demonstrate that they were getting up and moving about and interacting at a higher degree. And then we coupled that with the possibility of using that information against medications and the reduction of medications, which would then prove that interaction. Yeah. So, and then that created the nursing homes to be able to say, we have these programs in place and we can reduce or increase the quality of living within our organisation because of these things, and here's the data to prove it. So it ended up solving that one particular simple program of entertainment, ended up solving a whole range of different problems.
So just to pare back some sort of learning from that. So you've got a product, you've got a concept, but then you mentioned to look on the outskirts of who else you can help with the data and the learning behind what you're doing, and you found 5 partners. Now, what sort of information did you look into to dive into those particular areas and say, who can we help based on what we're doing? Where did you start there?
We looked at the industry and we looked to try and solve a problem that already existed within that industry.
Okay.
So that's when we went immediately to the Royal Commission, and we went, okay, what is the biggest concern with the Royal Commission, and what is the biggest problem that this industry has?
Yes.
And how can we then solve it?
Get it. So you're looking at your concept and idea.
And then how do we use data to solve that?
Yeah, no, very, very good.
Yep.
Okay.
And then how can we use this particular startup to capture that information?
Was there a process or a method around how you identified the data that would be useful, or how to ensure that you're capturing enough to meet those needs?
Well, this is where if you design the question before you design the data capture or the actual product, that's when you can engineer the product to be able to answer the question. So prior to so we've got an MVP, which is a very basic web page, but she is then moving into a whole range of an app solution. What she hasn't done is she hasn't built the app or nailed down the app criteria at this point, which then enabled us to go, okay, what problems do we need to solve? And therefore then, because we need to solve that individual one-on-one, then that created the need that the app has to be user login, whereas prior to that it wasn't user login. So you understand the questions that you're trying to solve, and then you build the product to meet those questions.
So a big takeaway there is...
Otherwise you've built the product. Yeah.
Yeah, so you built a product to serve what you perceive to be obviously entertainment, but in reality you're solving a bigger problem. So would you say, if you're walking into an industry, really dig in, understand all the core components and challenges within that industry, even though you perceive to be just solving this particular problem, potentially your product can evolve to solving bigger and better problems that can add more value to the whole industry?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got another startup that's actually just a travel itinerary builder.
Okay.
Now that's a very simple front-end solution.
Yes.
When you turn that product around and you have a look at the back end, you go, okay, what are we capturing here, and whose problem can we solve? You can solve an entire destination's problem by capturing individual party sizes, their interactions between different businesses, the clusters of businesses that they move through, how long they're staying there, where they're eating, and you can build an entire destination development plan based on all of that information if you choose to capture it at the front. So that then dictated to me that this product, this itinerary builder, needed to capture how many people are in your party, how long are you staying for, and to get them to actually pull in the businesses and build the itinerary within the app. And then we could, we never asked for they logged in, but we never used their actual identity. We create this pool of data, and then we can say to a destination, in your destination, 80% of your visitors are small families, young families with 2 children visiting for 3 days, and generally use 2 activities per day, and average they stay at this type of accommodation, you can answer a whole range of different questions with that.
Yeah, interesting. So you're basically in that sort of service. Is that a data play, or is that that product a fee for service, or is it just predominantly collecting data and then assisting locations in that area?
Oh, well, you collect the data and you create a product that is then the solution for the destination, and then you go to the destination and sell that product. So you actually create a revenue stream by putting meaning around that data, and we're interrogating it in a manner that will solve one of their problems. And the biggest problem for destinations is that is majority assumptive data that they're using. And it's really broad data that they're actually using because nobody's capturing it actually on a user level.
One of the questions I'd ask is, if we're exploring data and you go down that travel itinerary component, like how many numbers do you need statistically to be saying, all right, on average, this is where we're at? So how many people would you need at a destination in that particular case?
It would be data being built over a period of time. Yes. So I would suggest that, in the first 3 months of the activity, you wouldn't really get much meaning from it. And with a destination, you would have to have you'd be nearly hitting, I'm guessing here, but, you would have to have at least 50,000 users to be able to really start getting deep insights and be able to segment them without it being like using segmentation systems without it being biased, because, there would be, and it would have to be over a period of time because there would be various biases as well put onto the destination based on weather patterns, holiday, school holiday patterns, all sorts of different things. So you would need to build that over time. So that would be, a product that they could interrogate at a moment in time, but also as at, periods. And again, that's then all those questions, the way you question that data actually then helps you create the product for the end user to use.
And the end user in that case is the destination, not necessarily just, obviously you have to engage people coming on to build their itinerary and give value there, otherwise they're not going to come and give you any data at all that's going to be valuable to any destination, let alone an interface that's good for them. So it's one of those, it's the two-pronged approach. So a data play in this, you need both. You need people bringing in the data, their itinerary, as well as then the destination interested in it. So you need the data in a form that's going to deliver value to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only way of having the destination that is actually interested in the end result is a destination that can't solve that problem for themselves. But it just, I suppose the big key takeaway is with all of this is that, when you're developing new solutions or using data or capturing any form of data, it's really important at such an early infancy to understand what it is you have, what problems you're needing to solve, and then build the product against that, as opposed to just always saying, okay, I've got an entertainment product and all I need to do is sing a few songs and video it and put it onto an app. That's not where it stops. There's so much more that can happen.
Yeah, and I think it's a very interesting thought because we all sit on the fact of, I hear it all the time, we get focused in on the piece of technology we're building and we focus all the energy on that product, but looking on the outskirts, there's a business model around it, and this is leading to a different business model that can potentially impact the way you build your product. So some really good insight there. Jacinta, thanks for sharing that insight. Now, one thing I want to dive in a little bit about is you've recently set up a data startup program. Now, I want to talk a bit about that, what that means, and some of the areas that you take startups through to get some real clarity around what their data play is and what's important when they're exploring data.
So we've partnered with the federal government to deliver a 3-month data project for startups, and we've used economy of scale to be able to deliver that. So we've got a team of data experts in, including data architects and ETL developers, SQL developers,
Yes.
and in particular being led by a gentleman called Patrick Spedding.
Okay.
Now he's out of the UK, but has worked for a number of years with IBM and developing their business intelligence tools. So he actually developed the tools that then enable us to bring everything together. So normally speaking, it would be a $14,000 to a $20,000 project for an individual startup, which no startup can afford. But when we've brought the opportunity for 5 businesses or 5 startups to come together and be able to join the program, and it's been subsidised by the federal government to the tune of $7,000 plus, which then means that the startups only need to invest $5,000 to be able to create a business intelligence program around their specific startup that looks at. So initially, we build the business intelligence dashboard so they understand what questions that they need answers to know the success of their business or how to get their business back into success, and where to make those pivots. And so that's the initial product that they end up coming away with, which is priceless on a business level, particularly for early startups. And then secondly, you work with Patrick to identify data partners and identify new data streams. Now, we've got a couple of startups already in, and we've actually matched them to their data partners already, and the data partner has actually sponsored them into the program.
Interesting. Okay, so they're paying the additional $5,000 for that.
And in that sense, then, the way that we approached that was, here's a number of different potential data partners. Let's go out and talk to a couple of them with Patrick, so that Patrick can sort of speak that data side and have an early understanding of what data that partner may actually need or what problem they need solving. And then see if they are that engaged and actually really do need that problem solved. And if they sponsor you into the program, then we can develop it against their needs specifically. So then that creates a very, very long-term partnership with a startup, and it's a different approach to a venture capitalist approach of startup funding.
So for these startups, they're potentially pivoting from what the original idea was to developing a business that's going to suit the need of the data partner.
It's developing different criteria within their business that will answer the questions for that data partner. Correct.
Okay.
Get it.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned business intelligence dashboard. Let's dig in a little bit on that. So just say I'm a startup and you mentioned, I don't know, let's pick an industry. What's an industry you know very well and worked in before? So you said photography or even printing photos. Would that be something we can explore a little bit in terms of designing a business intelligence dashboard?
Yeah, it can be. I have got a lived experience that's that we used a data intelligence dashboard to. It was a program that we were rolling out across New South Wales with 3 government agencies, and we were collecting a significant amount of data with that, and like a lot of data actually. So we really had to debunk and understand what was meaningful and what wasn't, which then meant we had to understand what success looked like for our program, and that created the data intelligence dashboard. The business intelligence dashboard. So our dashboard was basically understanding, during the course of the program, if there was any bottlenecks. We had a number of external and internal stakeholders too, so we needed to be able to manage those stakeholders, workload, resource capacity, and then also revenue. So, we were paying them and we had to manage that payment system. We were paying businesses, we had to manage that payment system against the budget. As new opportunities came to the business, instead of, us sitting there going, oh, okay, if we go out to non-profit organisations, there is a big pool of non-profit organisations. We can, extend the program or double the program, the capacity of the program. So let's go and do it. What the business intelligence dashboard enabled us to do was to plug in that scenario and then project out whether or not that was feasible with the capacity that we actually had within the program, or whether or not it would max out our capacity. whether or not it would max out our budget and our spend, and what impact would it have on the long-term project. So does that then shorten the project, or does it create a longevity, like further, does it lengthen out the program?
Okay, so it's forecasting.
Yeah,
it's basically
cash flow.
Yep,
it forecasted our cash flow. We could then set up our KPIs, which then we could report directly against that cash flow with the KPIs. So we could understand, okay, in the last month we surpassed our KPIs. Why? So then we could turn around and we could understand the activity that we had done in the past, and then we could replicate that activity out into the future to, continue to either control the KPIs, change the KPIs. We could do year on year. So have a look at this time last year, what happened, and the growth of that. So there was a lot of business development that we were able to capture and project based on the data, the business intelligence board.
Perfect. So
dashboard.
That dashboard there is, in reality, if I'm starting from scratch building that, it's all about the strategic direction of the business and putting all those mechanisms in place to track, measure, and see what's important to the business moving forward. So your outcomes, what you're focusing on. You mentioned KPIs there. You mentioned cash flows, trajectories, predictions as well. So with building that dashboard, what do you generally use to build that? Are you using off-the-shelf tech or building that custom? What are you doing there?
For that particular solution, we used Cognos. So we were drawing together about 5 different live sources of data and putting that through a data warehouse against other data. So it was a bit of a data nightmare.
Okay.
But it worked because we had stakeholders on all different levels.
Yes.
So we had, and so therefore then their dashboards needed to say something different. They had to make decisions. So which would, if you bring that down into a business level, you would have your director and your marketing team and your comms team and your tech team. Yep. They all need different questions answered.
Yes.
So we derived a specific dashboard for each of those as well. So which then, we had to then test that data against bigger data, so a data lake as well. So it was, so Cognos is a very, very high-end, extremely programmable, specific program. So you don't normally need to go to that level, but that was the complexity that we needed, so that would solve that.
So within the framework of your startup world, so the startup program, what are they developing the business intelligence dashboards in? What do they generally do? They may not have anything at this stage. So they're pulling data from different sources. So what's their process there?
And again, this is why we try and get them in early, is because we can actually solve that problem simply to begin with. So the reason why it got so complex with the other program was because the product was built without understanding what questions needed answered. So it was a very complex solution then had to be put in place.
Okay.
With our startups that we've got now, with our seniors channel startup, she's actually going to be using DataBox, which is a free program on the level that she needs. It's captured over time. It gives her a really accurate dashboard. There's multiple different dashboards that she can seek, and we can actually interrogate up to 10 different sources. So, the DataBox, which is just such a simple solution, can be integrated into without a financial burden to startups if you know how to use it properly and if you know how to question the data correctly and capture it. And then you can move up into Tableau. There's a lot of off-the-shelf solutions. Power BI.
Yes.
Google has also got a data solution that's looking to be quite good, and even as simple as I have actually developed one based on Excel.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of Excel ones floating around.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. That's a great program, that one.
Place we generally start as the first thing we turn to. We've got some data, let's write it in some cells and do some calculations on it. Done.
Yep,
perfect.
So, at a very simple rule, would you suggest for anyone to just start capturing any data they can initially?
No, yes and no. That's I think if you go out with a plan, I think it's a lot better, and that's when you're not capturing data for the sake of capturing data. We are inundated with it, and then once once you have a look at all of the data, and if you haven't got the clear questions in your head, it's really difficult to interrogate anything. And if you're just capturing anything and everything, it just becomes even more complex on how to actually string that together to be able to answer anything.
Yeah, I think you're saying to end up with too much noise. Yeah, just data overload, and then you don't know what to do.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's the choice paradox. Kicks in where the cognitive load of trying to actually choose what you want, and we find it very hard to let go of things, and data's included in that. So we just capture everything and go, we might use some of it at some point, but actually no, it's just slowing your system down. Get rid of it.
Yeah, okay.
Is there
clean it out?
On following on to that, is there a possibility of having a bias when you're looking at the data to have it say what you want it to say, or to make your assumptions true rather than looking at the data in its true form?
Yeah, I've got a big problem with that. You can make data say anything that you want it to say, and I'm dead against that. And that's why I actually don't. Even with user testing, you can bias a user testing session so easily, and or you can go after where the crowd is, and just if you're going after where the crowd is when you're doing user research, you're biasing the information. And Facebook's actually even got some issues with this at the moment, where the algorithm is actually biasing against certain various products based on where geographically it's being located due to the demographics of that particular geographical location. So they're having issues with it as well. So even something that isn't human touched can also still create these biases. So I think removing the ego and having an external party look at your data, understand your questions, and try and match those answers is critical, because no matter what, we don't want our businesses or our startups to fall over, or the tech to fall over. And this is one of the most powerful tools that you can use to actually stop that from happening, or get an early warning that this isn't the correct way of doing it. And we've come a long way from before we used to capture data and that would then give us an average, and everybody would know, well, anybody who's in research will know that the average is the middle point between the two extremes. It doesn't actually exist. And so we were making all our decisions based on this point in the middle that doesn't exist. There's no user that is, the average family in Australia is 2.3 children. There's no 0.3.
Yeah, it doesn't. No one's walking around with just 2 legs. Or
So, we've moved from average to causality. So when you put behaviour behind, or behavioural algorithms behind this data, and actually start understanding causality, that's when we can really make a difference and use data to its true ability.
Okay, so probably a bit of a technical one, but touching on that point you made about Facebook's algorithm. So so moving towards big data and AI, with inherent biases within programmers who make these things, that gets influenced in the software they develop. So how would that be avoided to get clean data, rather than having that bias implemented, or the lens that you're seeing it through to not be implemented? What sort of approach would you take from the person either creating it or the person viewing it?
Yeah, wow, that's a loaded question too. I actually don't know. I haven't put my head to trying to solve it. The only way we can solve it is by learning from it. So we didn't know that was going to happen until such time it happened. So we need to now learn from that and go, okay, there has to be an element of, I'll use an example because, that's the best way of demonstrating it. So the behavioural algorithms online, both with Google and, any algorithm that's selling something. So, if I go out and look for a product, I will only be shown the product that the business who owns that product has done a good job of playing the algorithm.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
correct.
if that product hasn't played the algorithm, so it hasn't advertised where it needed to advertise, it hasn't used the methodology that it needed to use to actually be able to get up into the algorithm, I will never know that product actually exists.
Mm-hmm.
So the algorithm is now dictating what I am exposed to.
Yep.
So the only way to fix that in the learning, in the machine learning of the actual algorithm is to actually put an error method in. So, show it to 80% of people that we know are users, and then an error message, a method of, and also these group here just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how you're going to work that out in an algorithm, but there has to be a percentage of error put into it to continuously train it.
So that would be similar to, say, when you see a Google ad, an AdWords image, you can click on the little cross and say, stop showing me this. And they give you the option because I've purchased it. So they're trying to close the loop to know, all right, we showed an ad, you ended up purchasing the thing that we tracked, whether it was through us or not, or it's, I don't want to see this anymore.
Mm.
It's not relevant.
Yeah, so it's not relevant
so that's
to
what
me.
that group would be.
Yeah. And that would be the 20% that we're going to show it to you, even though we know it's not necessarily relevant to you, but it actually may be relevant to you.
Yeah.
You just haven't demonstrated the online behavior that tells us or that fits within our pattern.
Mm-hmm. And then, in that sort of selling and marketing example, the bias would come from the advertiser or the business who's actually paying for the ad, because they're only going to show you from a pool of products that are based on people paying, not what's actually relevant to you. They're not showing you any product on the internet.
Yep.
And then, just touching on that, another example would be, I'm not sure if you ever heard about this sort of like AI bots that people train for chatting, and they train them off data of Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
They inherently end up racist and Nazis. Like, they bring up Nazis and Adolf Hitler in conversation, and they end up being racist because they're being trained by a data set that is skewed in that way normally.
Mm. Yeah. And I suppose that would be like any form of extreme content. If you're going to sort of be relying on any of that, it's going to be biased towards that, and that's any form of blog, because the blogs are actually extreme towards either the business or the industry.
Yeah, they're all opinionated.
So I think we're working our way into a big sea of noise. That's the only way of putting it. So and news and the fake news and all of that sort of stuff. So it's really it's and we're making it up as we go, and we're failing as we're going as well.
And that's what those little reactions and those markers that these systems put together. So the like and the unlike and the whatever, those different reactions are just little signals to try and tune the algorithm so that it can present to you the stuff that will make you happier or that you would like, in the case of whether you react to something as sad or happy.
Yeah, and we've, as consumers, we've moved. We're nearly upset over push marketing now. Like, we are absolutely, we've been desensitized to it because we've moved from push marketing, the screamy advertising that comes off television through newspapers and radio, and we've moved towards pull marketing. So we pull the information towards us that we actually want. So is it that we need to be trained to understand how to pull effectively in response to the algorithm, as opposed to teaching the algorithm how to respond to us?
That's a heavy question. Yeah, because in reality, I think anyone in our office and working environment, there's certain people in our environment that can find information faster and answers quicker than others. And that's just their way of learning how to, and Anthony's probably one of them. If you want anything Googled or found, just talk to Anthony, he'll find it for you. There's just something that he does, or the pattern that he does, and he's figured out a way to find answers quickly, whereas others may take longer. And I think that's a really interesting point to actually talk about. How
and a personal, interesting, fun fact. My oldest daughter, who is 25, she's Asperger's, very high functioning Asperger's, but definitely Asperger's. And her Google searches are phenomenal. And I think it's her. So she declutters a lot of things by nature. And so she cuts through a lot of white noise, so she can get to a very, very pertinent question very, very quickly. So therefore, then her results are brilliant.
Yes.
So she's found stuff. She's a research queen. That one.
I think it is. It's getting really clear on what you're looking for, and then you're going to get a better result, right? It's like anything in life. If you're not clear on what you're looking for, or in the presence of what outcomes you're driving towards, you're not going to know which questions to look at. In the case of looking for data, in the case of just searching Google, if you're going into it vague, you're not going to get a great answer like anything.
In the case of where algorithms are up to these days, they're based off keywords and key phrases. So if you write in a sentence, while they're developing natural language processing to be able to understand entire sentences, like, what will be the weather tomorrow in blah, blah, blah. If you just type in weather and the state, it will get the same answer quicker, because it doesn't have to sit there and understand what the intent and the context of your sentence is.
And that's understanding what the algorithm is doing.
And knowing how it works.
In the best advantage. Get it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's another really good podcast, that one.
It would be. I'll let Anthony ponder on that one. Interesting channel to dive down. Right. So and I think it's probably a good place to sort of just get some points and tips for you. So if I'm a startup and what are 3 tips I need to start considering data? So I'm designing a product, or I'm even in a business designing a product. Where should I look? What's the number one thing I start with, and then what are some following on things I should look at?
I'm very, very focused on user-centered design. So as you and startups, they're startups, and they go through all of the horrible stuff that they go through based on passion for their product. So that's their key driver. We can never take that away from them, and the same as businesses.
Yes.
However, you need to, in that passion, you need to understand what problem you are solving for the user, and build directly against that, and continuously test against that, and use non-assumptive data to do that. So build small, short, and frequently.
Yes.
Test regularly, fail often and cheap. Pivot and continue on, but use facts to continuously inform that. So, and you have to look from 3 different angles. What problem am I solving for my customer? Firstly, what problem am I solving for myself? What problem am I solving for my customer? And what problem am I solving for my industry? And that's when you can get the 3 perspectives.
I think that industry one's a very interesting one, because that's where you're going to get to the answer of who potentially could be a data partner in this world, or who
Absolutely
are we helping from a holistic
and if you
perspective.
you go after a heartfelt need, and you solve a heartfelt need, and you nail that, you've got product.
Yes.
Your product will work.
Yes.
But until you understand what that problem is, deeply understand what that problem is, understand how to respond to that heartfelt need, you can't develop your product, because that's all of that informs how you pitch it, how you position it, how you build it, everything.
And in looking at that need for the industry as a startup, what I've quickly thought of, there's probably 2 ways to do it: is try and learn everything there is about that industry and understand it in and out and get to that, or try and bring an advisor on board who can get you there quicker and provide those insights from within the industry itself, rather than an outsider looking in.
I think the startup or the business owner is normally intimately involved with the industry anyway, so they can normally give you the insights. What the point of difference is the external data person actually looking at it and going, hang on, how can I solve this through data architecture? And therefore then what question needs answered, and then how do I seek the data or interrogate the data to be able to answer that? And if I can't, that's not the partner. If I can, bang, we've got a partner, or I've got a problem to solve.
Yes.
So I think, that the actual startup's probably intimately enough involved with the industry to be able to really understand or suggest some of the problems that are out there. But it's the data architect or the data solution that can really start seeing, because as I've worked out in, I can see data has a lot of meaning to me, and I can see patterns in data. And after I've sort of, built a whole data insight, I can actually see something that's 3D. I've built, I've created personas across the Australian, 62 personas of the Australian population. And when I finish talking about that particular persona, I actually have a 3D person I've got a human being in front of me that I've just described. So I can take data to something that's really quite visual and answer and see patterns that that some people can't see. So, and I thought that was normal. Apparently not.
So if you're a startup and going through this process and you're trying to bring on a data architect or an engineer to come on board and give you advice, would it be useful for them to get two different opinions from two different data architects, so that way the biases aren't coming through and skewing the data, showing them that they can answer it but they actually can't?
I would actually no, I wouldn't go for two different opinions. I would actually just interview the data architect correctly, because you will find a data architect is so analytical that they actually don't have biases.
Okay.
Because data is God to data.
Yeah, they just see the data as it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what they focus on.
How their
See
brain works.
It delivers.
Yep.
Generally, the bias is going to come from someone probably that person or that founder that is trying to solve the problem.
Involved.
Yeah, that's emotional attachment, right? So if you're involving a data architect, their job is
and
to
they
just
will
trawl through data.
continuously seek the data that will support their decision.
Okay.
And that's not the approach that should be taken. The approach is always seek the data to solve the question based on fact, as opposed to you can, and that's why I say, you can make data tell you anything you want to, if you can, because you can taint it to do that.
Yes.
You must really hate some of those news announcements they make.
Yeah, not going to help you.
Yeah, those research papers come up and just dismiss things or do it wrong and present the wrong information.
Yeah, and out of context. Yep.
And that happens all the time. We can turn data towards our favour, and you can utilise data from a perspective of as a business to sell through products, to influence consumers, and it can be a very interesting game in terms of data. So not getting caught up in it, and just focusing on fact is probably one key takeaway from today's conversation. Yep. No, very, very good. Jacinta, I want to thank you for joining us today, just talking a little bit about data and something we really haven't had a conversation about with anyone in terms of when they're looking at their business model, non-techs looking to solve problems. Data is not one thing that's really come up in terms of a big picture anyway. So really good to get some insight as to where you could look at and what some of the options are. Would you like to share some information about yourself, Jacinta, where people can look out and find you and potentially connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Just search Jacinta Outlaw. There's not many outlaws out there. All of my information is there. Feel free to reach out and chat to me. We've also got our website, which is for the data accelerator or incubator.
Yes.
It's 5edigital.com.au.
Okay.
And then my website for the company, the transformation company, is the fifth element.m for Mary, E for egg. But absolutely feel free to reach out and connect with me definitely through LinkedIn. I share a whole heap of data posts and information about data and how to use data with business models and all of that sort of stuff from across the world and all of my networks. So there's a lot of information there. And my focus is a lot on small business and startups. So with my first business being a 1 hour photo lab, I am very, very attached to small businesses and understand that they're the backbone of Australia. So
they are.
Really like to support them.
No, thanks, Jacinta. Really appreciate your time.
So if there's any startups or founders listening to this, is there any sort of like one key takeaway you'd like to just leave them with and get them started on their journey?
Yeah, connect early with what the potential is of your startup, to understand, what problems, what heartfelt needs you are responding to, and test really hard against that. It's a long journey, and so startups need to have all the tools and resources that they could possibly have to help support their resilience that they need to get through the journey that they've got ahead of them.
Perfect. Thank you, Jacinta.
Thank you for that.
We'll end that there, and really appreciate your time again. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for everything.
Cool. All right, thanks, guys.